Something called triangular arbitrage exists because the nature of the currency market is that while there are some centralized exchanges out there, many ways to trade currency exist outside of that. So you can trade currency with anybody, and individuals or corporations will often trade directly with banks. And banks may go to an exchange and trade, and various banks may go to that exchange, but banks may also trade with each other, as well as with their corporate clients or individuals like you. And so in that sense, the currency market can be very fragmented. And when you have fragmentation like this, sometimes you have a divergence in prices between what one bank is willing to offer and another one is. And the divergence doesn't last long. Eventually, one bank will notice, oh, I've underpriced the dollar to yen versus bank number one here. But sometimes it's there. And quick arbitrageurs is what we call people who specialize in this type of activity, will recognize that they can buy it where it's cheap and then go and sell the same thing where it's expensive. And that's more or less an instant and relatively riskless profit. Sometimes it's a little more complicated. There's an additional step that an arbitrager would have to take. They don't just go to where one bank has a particular currency pair that's cheap and sell it where it's more expensive. They'll find one bank who's selling a particular currency pair, another bank that's selling a related but not quite the same currency pair, and yet a third bank, or even a fourth, which with they can cycle back around and realize an arbitrage profit. That is, they can use cross rates to kind of take advantage of any deviation, even if it's not exactly the same pair. They can use cross rates to take advantage of temporary deviations between different price quotations to buy and sell different currencies between different banks. So let's make this more concrete by giving some numbers and names to this idea. Bank number one, we're going to call that Fuji Bank. Fuji Bank deals in yen to dollar exchange rates. Right now, they're offering 92.34 yen for every dollar, offering it to buy or to sell. Bank number two, Rushmore Bank, instead specializes in Swiss francs versus dollars. And right now, it's offering 1.06 Swiss francs for every dollar, buying or selling. And then finally, we have Matterhorn Bank, who is offering to buy or sell yen to Swiss francs. Here at a rate of 90.17 yen for every Swiss franc. And so you, arbitrageur, have 12,200,000 Swiss francs of capital at your discretion to try and take advantage of some triangular arbitrage opportunities. And the idea is you start somewhere. Here you're starting in Swiss francs, say, and you try to convert your way around so that you eventually end up again in Swiss francs. And the idea is that hopefully by that process, you'll end up with more Swiss francs than you started with at the beginning. So let's try something where we start with Swiss francs, convert those Swiss francs to yen, and then we convert the yen into dollars here over at Fuji Bank, and then we convert the dollars over back to Swiss francs again, kind of completing the circle, and let's just see how many Swiss francs we end up with. Kind of just by trial and error. Let's see what we end up with. First, the Swiss francs to yen. We start with the 12,200,000 Swiss francs. And first, we are going to go to Rushmore Bank and convert those Swiss francs to dollars. So we start with our starting capital, convert it at this exchange rate, Swiss francs to dollars. We're going to divide by the number of Swiss francs per dollar. And we're going to end up with about $11.5 million. So I just need to divide here just because 1 Swiss franc is worth more than $1. So if I'm going from Swiss francs into dollars, and I know how I have to divide to get a number that's smaller, a number here that's smaller than this one. So as we're kind of walking through these steps here and these various currency conversions, just kind of keep that logic in mind as you're questioning whether to multiply and divide. Okay, so I've got $11.5 million, and the next step is to go somewhere and exchange these dollars into another currency. And so first things first, I said I was going to go to Matterhorn here, but I noticed Matterhorn doesn't actually trade in dollars. So that option is going to be out. And instead, it looks like I'm going to have to go to Fuji Bank. So Fuji Bank deals in dollars. Specifically, they exchange dollars for yen. So I'm going to take my dollars here that I now have after converting them from Swiss francs. And I'm going to go from dollars to yen. Initially, I went from Swiss franc to dollars. And now I'm going from Swiss franc, dollars to yen. So I guess you could say I was here, I went to Rushmore Bank, now I'm over at Fuji Bank, and I'm about to convert these dollars to yen. The exchange rate they're offering here is 92.34 yen to the dollar. I'm going to take this number, dollar terms, divide it by that exchange rate, and that's going to get me how $1 buys many more yen, so I'm not going to divide this time. I'm actually going to multiply. This is why it's always good to check your logic. But multiplying by that spot exchange rate now gives me proceeds in terms of yen terms. It's going to be a very large number. It's about 1.06 billion yen. Okay, so now I've got a bunch of yen. And I'm going to search for a bank that I can switch this yen to. Ideally, I can switch it back to Swiss franc and see if I can head back home. So I've got yen here. It looks like I can, I've already dealt with Rushmore Bank, so I think that path is out. We already traded with them. Let's go and visit Matterhorn Bank. And here I see they're offering yen for Swiss francs. 90.17 to the Swiss franc. So I will take this billion yen or so and visit that bank and ask them to convert that at their offered exchange rate of 90.17 to the Swiss franc. So here I am going to divide, going into something smaller, Swiss francs. And that number is going to be 11,786,416 Swiss francs. So I'm back in my home currency. I guess if I was based in Switzerland, I'm back in the currency I started in. And so you see I've kind of closed this triangular loop here. Or perhaps it's more of a polygon, but whatever. Since I'm in the same currency now, I can go ahead and calculate my arbitrage profits, if any, for this particular path. That's going to be my ending proceeds minus my starting proceeds. And for us here, that's this 11,786,000 Swiss francs I ended up with versus the amount that I started with, which was the 12,200,000 Swiss francs. So subtracting ending proceeds versus starting proceeds, I actually end up here with a loss of 413,583 Swiss francs. So this is not an arbitrage, it's actually a loss. So this wouldn't be the ideal path to take. But before we give up, let's try one more alternative path and see if we can salvage something from this set of exchange quotes to offer to buy or sell or exchange currency. So instead of taking this path, we're going to try a different route. We're going to still start with our 12.2 million Swiss francs, but we're going to kind of abandon this here. Sometimes it's just trial and error. So starting out with our Swiss francs, maybe instead of going to Rushmore, we go to Matterhorn Bank. We can't go to Fuji Bank over here because they don't deal in Swiss francs. But our other option here is Matterhorn. They do trade Swiss francs in exchange for yen. I start out with my 12.2 million Swiss francs, convert them at that exchange rate of yen to Swiss francs of 90.17 to the franc. And I end up with about 1.1 billion yen. And so the next thing is that I'm going to take my yen and I'm going to find somewhere to shop it around. It looks like I can't go to Rushmore because they don't trade in yen. And so I'm going to go to Fuji Bank here. Fuji trades yen for the dollars. And so I'm going to take my yen and exchange it at a rate of 92.34 yen to the dollar. That leaves me with about $11 million. So I take my yen, convert it at the exchange rate that Fuji is offering, and I end up with about $11,913,000. And my final step here is to kind of find a way home. I want to go from dollars back to my original currency of Swiss francs. And it looks like the only one left to trade with here is going to be Rushmore Bank. They will trade dollars in exchange for Swiss francs. So let's see what those dollars finally get me when I close this loop. Notice $1 buys more Swiss francs. So I'm going to remember to multiply to get a bigger number here. When I convert my dollars into Swiss francs at the rate that Rushmore Bank is offering, that 106 Swiss franc to the dollar rate. And that gets me this time a round trip amount of 12.628 million Swiss francs. So if I compare that to the number that I started with, using that formula that we previously saw, we get a difference of, looks like it's going to be about a 428,096 Swiss franc profit taking this path. So with triangular arbitrage, it's really all about finding the correct path to see if you can exploit price differentials across the different institutions that are trading currencies.